Welcome to today's anatomy question. I'm Lizzie Lassiter here with the great Penelope Richards
Oh, the headstander.
and Mary Richards, of course, our fearless teacher today. The question is about forward folds. We're going to get into that. Is it okay to let my back round in forward bends? Before we do that, I want to encourage you to go to this website, www.experientialanatomy.yoga. We have a free newsletter where we send out videos like this. So if you're wanting intelligent conversations, that are targeted to yoga teachers and serious students, that's the place to go. Mary, what is the myth? First of all, let's unpack the myth around forward folding. I have been told in so many yoga classes as a student to lengthen and extend, lift the breastbone to protect the lower back as I'm going into, let's say, a seated forward fold like Paschimottanasana or even Uttanasana, standing forward fold. Why do you teach something? What do you teach, and is it okay to round?
Okay. So, first of all, low back is not flat. Okay? First of all, simple anatomical fact. The low back displays something called the lordosis, a concave curve, as does our neck. Whereas our upper back, our thoracic, and our sacrum display convex curves, primary curves. Those form in utero. We're born with them. And then the secondary curves of the low back and the neck develop in response to gravity. Okay, because it's actually the curves that give us stability. All right. So, first of all, your low back's not flat. In fact, it's the opposite.
Or
Okay.
it shouldn't be flat. That's not the goal.
Yeah, but we've been taught that it is, we've been taught this idea of straight, thin lines is what we want to move in the direction of, and that's not based on anatomical reality. There's not a single straight bone in the body. Even the flat bones, like your sternum or your scapula, the shoulder blade, your breastbone and your shoulder blade, they're not flat.
Yeah.
They have curves. Okay. So there's that. All right. I believe the reason this idea of lifting the chest and swan diving into forward folds, whether it's Uttanasana or the standing wide angle forward fold, Prasarita Padottanasana. I believe that this comes from an idea that's well intentioned, which is that we don't want to forward fold, we don't want to flex into forward folds at lumbar 5 and S1, lumbar 3 and 4, and T12 L1. Okay.
Hmm.
And that's true. Okay. We don't actually create movement from our vertebral column. Our vertebral column is like a big antenna and it receives movement. Okay. So we don't want to create it there. The problem is that the way we're seeking to prevent moving at these more vulnerable intervertebral segments is that that's not where the how we can prevent that. The skill we need in order to practice any hinging movement, whether we're seated or standing, is we need to be able to roll our pelvis over and around the heads of our thigh bones. The flexion comes from the hips at the axis, AXIS, axis of the hips. That's the key.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is to stop cueing or thinking about lifting into back bends, swan diving into forward bends, swan diving into forward bends, lengthening into forward bends, sneaky back bending into forward bends, and rather to put our attention to our pelvis and whether it is tipping forward
Boom.
first, and then to let the spine receive the movement from the
Exactly.
pelvis.
Exactly. And here is the kinesiologic reality, my friends. Once we get to 90 degrees of hip flexion or thereabouts, once we form, once we square the box, your low back automatically moves into flexion. It the move flexion of the hip and lumbar flexion are coupled movements. They are married to one another.
Okay, so 90 degrees, how we can picture that, that would be in Uttanasana when I'm halfway down. From
Correct.
that point on, you're saying the low back has to round, wants to
Yes.
round?
Yes, and it will do so automatically. And you can tell yourself until the cows come home to flatten your back, to keep lifting your chest, etc. And it's not going to change the reality of the lumbar flexion. You're either going to have to reduce the amplitude of the forward fold. You're not going to be able to move as far as your body's capable of. And you're also going to increase disc pressure throughout the discs of your vertebral column in a way that doesn't make sense for the shape that your body's creating. And it's
Hmm.
destabilizing. You can't transfer force and load as well out of those discs because you're confusing them.
So it's confusing to the low back to try to say back bend, but forward bend, but back bend, but forward bend, right? All of this lifting of the breastbone. I mean, I always have assumed this comes from an aesthetic interest in asana, a kind of looking from the outside at the body and saying, "Oh, it would look more beautiful for this magazine cover if the person is kind of lifting as opposed." What do you think is our resistance to rounding?
Because we're a curvist society. Seriously, like what do we think curves are typically
Yeah.
associated with women, with female form. And this, I don't think it's a newsflash to anyone that we live in a patriarchal construct. And so curves are discouraged
Yeah,
until
we want a
they're
flat stomach.
commodified, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I pull out my light on yoga, oh, which I won't do, you'll look at Mr. Iyengar, whom I believe we could all agree is an expert on asana, and he's in Janu Sirsasana, Paschimottanasana, Triangamukha Kapata Paschimottanasana, Uttanasana, Prasarita. Take your pick, and his back is rounded when he is in those poses. Because again, hip flexion and lumbar flexion go together. The key is where the movement is initiated from, and the movement where we need to initiate flexion from in the body is at the axis of the hips.
So that's the hip joint. That's where my thigh bone meets my pelvis, right?
Boom.
Okay.
Exactly.
So homework for everyone watching this video, get out your copy of Light on Yoga and look at some of the forward bends. Fact check Mary Richards and see if you agree. Last question here, Mary. So give us some idea of the types of cues that you use when you teach forward bends that are kind of what are the new cues as opposed to if we're letting go of the swan diving type of
Mm.
cues, what do you instead ask your students to do?
Bring the eyes of your front ribs, bring them down toward your thighs. Lift your back bottom ribs out of your waist Exhale, draw your organs back deeper into your body. And then you can only move at your hips. Roll your pelvis over the tops of your thigh bones and allow your body to flow freely like a river from the basin of the pelvis once you're in the pose.
I love that so much. Okay, last question. Is there something good for our spine, for the vertebral column about doing forward bends? I mean, we're so afraid of them because we all live in this collapsed archetype at the computer, on the phone, forward head that we see with everyone around us and we feel in our own body. So I think that's part of the resistance of forward bending that we think, oh, we don't want to collapse. But is there a positive aspect to the like to forward our forward bends good for us if we do them in the way you're describing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because we need to preserve our ability to hinge, to fold forward so we can pick things up and put on our shoes and etc. And forward folds are a great way to stretch your hamstrings. The
Yeah.
key is balance it with quad and hip flexor stretches because the hamstrings are long, skinny structures, whereas the quads are beefy, meaty muscles. And in my opinion, in yoga, we overstretch hamstrings, understretch quads. We really
Yeah.
need to be doing more dancer pose variations, then we need to be doing forward folds. But you gotta have cooperative hamstrings because that
Oh,
affects everything too. Like how your hamstrings respond to flexion affects like how your glutes work, how your calves work, etc.
so good, Mary. Okay, tell us where we can find you on the internet.
Should I? No. At yogawithmaryrichards.com. That's my website. And then you can find me online at Yoga with Mary Richards on the gram and Facebook and the like.
So good. Okay, go to www.experientialanatomy.yoga, sign up for the newsletter, and you will receive videos like this in your inbox to support your own practice, exploration, and your teaching. Mary, what a delight to work with you as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lizzie.